morning, everybody. Welcome for this PROMSG event. I would like to introduce a delightful and amazing speaker, Melanie Franklin from Agile Change Management Limited. The topic for today is, as you know, it's on the screen, best leadership behaviors for effective Agile. Melanie will go through methodologies, processes, and techniques for Agile leaders to incorporate for effective outcomes. Melanie will provide examples of leadership behaviors, challenges for adoption, and how you can help to get this adoption. Now I'm going to leave it for Melanie, but before we start, I'm going to have this poll. If anybody can complete this poll so we know what sort of experience you got on Agile.
Just helps me frame my comments to you guys. That's the only reason I'm asking for these questions, is just so I can get to know my audience a little bit, although I can see some friends already in the audience. So welcome to everybody. Okay, that's interesting. So we've got a lot of Agile being used for IT initiatives then. We haven't got an agreed approach. There's about just over a third of you. And I understand that a few of you have perhaps put comments in the chat. So I think Vibha is going to read those out for us.
Yes.
Okay, it's really helpful. Thanks for this. I'll end the poll. So thank you very much for joining in. Yeah, I think we can see some static stuff there. So any interesting comments in the chat there, Vibha?
Not at the moment. I can't see anything at the moment. Let's see.
So anybody who please put comments in the chat functions. They went for other. Okay, so some people are doing some hybrid waterfall. Okay. All right. Okay. All right.
There's one yes, but let's move this over the screen.
Okay, well, thank you for that. It was really, really helpful. So hopefully we can,
I can see the
I'll
chat,
pick it up and run with it now, Vibha. So you can put yourself on mute and you can sit back and hopefully enjoy your evening.
Okay, thank you very much, Melanie.
It's a pleasure. Okay, I work at the sharp end of what I might think of as big Agile, in that big as in Agile is a cultural change, and I sit in the boardrooms of various organizations with senior leadership teams trying to understand what shift the culture of their organization is going to have to make in order to accommodate this agility, this flexibility, this openness, this transparency that they are seeking. They've made a decision that Agile is the answer, but they don't understand what Agile is. Now, the half of you that answered the poll and said you've got Agile working, but it's within your IT development areas, that's not something that's really deeply understood, I think, at senior management level, in that the Agile methodologies that many of us on this call might be familiar with are not familiar to that group. They are coming at Agile from a different perspective. They're coming at Agile from agility is flexibility. It's a response to a fast-moving macro environment. It's a way of navigating through uncertainty and volatility. They're not in any way looking at it as any kind of methodology. So when they're looking at Agile from that perspective, they are looking at Agile as a change in attitude, a change in culture, a change in behavior, and how we get things done. And my first answer to them is, yeah, okay, this is going to be about your leadership. You are going to have to change your behaviors. So I make the point, they know it already, it's why I'm in the room, that cultural change can't happen without leaders leading. And there have to be pace setters and role models within that. What I'm going to do in this webinar is explain and give examples of the core leadership behaviours that I see as most closely aligned to this agile culture. And it is worth saying that I developed an awful lot of this agile change approach to cut across all of the different agile methodologies, whether or not we're talking about work from the Agile Business Consortium or from the Scrum Alliance, the Agile Alliance, whether we're talking about Scaled Agile Framework, large-scale Scrum, the DAG methodology, and others. I think what we can all see with all of these is that there are a number of principles and values and philosophies. But what I've done is I've cut through that and said, actually, if you want to get to the heart of Agile, whatever the flavor, then you'll need to stick pretty closely to these concepts. The first is that everything you're doing is driven by business need. Now, that does get a laugh in the boardrooms because they're thinking, well, that's what we do anyway, isn't it? And I'm going, no, I don't think it is. I think that an awful lot of the time, what we do is we commission change because, and we keep building on the change because of technical excellence. Oh, we've got to have this, and it's got to be able to do this. Oh, what about this? And we drift further and further away from actually solving the problem at hand. I'm sure a lot of us have been involved in situations where perhaps there is already a solution and we're desperately looking for a home for it. That is the opposite of business need. So it means really digging into what is the capability we are looking to achieve? What are the things that we want to move away from? What's not working for us? Where do we want to expand into? So I think it's that whole conversation around what are we trying to become? What do we want to be? That's the business need. And too often that doesn't get the airtime that it clearly should. Instead, what we have is we have somebody's found a solution, whether or not that's a system and a platform from an IT perspective, or whether or not one of the most common ones is a new target operating model, or somebody's come up with an idea about being a one. If you put one and you put the brand like one Coca-Cola, one Unilever, you know, you don't need to go far to find that there are cultural change programs where it's about unifying and not being silo-based working. There's lots of solutions out there that are looking for a home. And when it comes to Agile, I think what we should be looking at is the business need first. And I think if we look at that, then that takes us into the next couple, which are interlinked, to be fair. The on-time delivery. Now, I think this is really important in an Agile world, is if we're going to do any kind of initiative, project, program, change, whatever, what we've actually got to set up, because it's so connected to the business need, is that we've got to agree that there are dates at which we are going to have something available, that we are going to ask people to start from that date forward working in a particularly new way. When we fail to deliver on time, we actually really harm the benefits that we might have achieved. I've got an example from just before Christmas, which was really uncomfortable, but I hope will show what's involved in terms of on-time delivery from a leadership perspective. During November, I was working with a team where we were going to be changing how a customer service and call center facility was working. And it involved a lot of IT change, system change, but also procedural change. There'd been lots of training courses. And the live date was the 15th of December. But some of the teams were struggling to create the functionality that would underpin these changes. And they came to me, and clearly a lot of their work was prioritized. You might be familiar with MOSCO, which is actually become a very bad term these days, but must, should, could, and won't have this time. And they were really concerned that a lot of the could haves, if you like, the lower level priorities were not going to get delivered. And I said, that's fine. The shift in behavior can still occur. And then they came to me at the end of November and said, really, things are not as good as we would like them to be. We're going to have to live without a lot of the should haves. Therefore, we should delay everything and go live at the end of January and move everybody at the end of January. And I said no. And that came at quite a cost, I think, emotionally, because I must admit I woke up on the 15th of December feeling very sick. But the reason I stuck to my guns was this, that when it comes to leading people through change and asking them to work differently, everything we do in terms of agile leadership means that we've taken people up the hill. We've asked them to go on training courses. We've asked them to work out with them, with their colleagues within their teams, new ways of working. We've asked them to announce things to customers and to tell suppliers that they're going to be working differently. And if we take people up the hill and then we go, oh, sorry, no, not ready yet, then we have to take them down the hill again. So how much will they trust me if at the end of January I say, oh, we're going to do it all again now? And how much energy will I have to expend trying to get them back up the hill? We can completely obliterate the benefits by that kind of approach. So on-time delivery, really, really important in a world where for agile initiatives, we are very flexible on the features and functionality and the scope of what we're doing, because we're trying to do the right thing, the most valuable thing all the time. We have to have some kind of certainty. And I think the timing piece of certainty is so important, because otherwise we're messing people around. But what I think helps me and what becomes my safety net is another key concept around an agile approach, which is being iterative. Because in that way, I've got that safety net of, well, okay, we didn't get everything into the 15th of December, but we're due to have another iteration at the end of February, and we can put things into that. And of course, you probably know the end of this story. The things that everybody were really worried about on the 15th of December as not being available and not working yet, and we're not doing that bit yet. When we came to plan the January, February pieces of work, some of those things absolutely needed to be included in the January, February work, but a lot of them started to fall away as a lot lower priorities, because as we ended December with this new way of working, this new approach to how we were dealing with customer inquiries, a lot of things settled down and started to fit together. And all of the wants and needs that had originally been absolutely core, the ones that didn't get delivered, only a few of them needed to be wrapped into the January and February work. So I do find that iterative approach is a safety net. Hey, version 2 is coming along. It's like, if you can't get on the first bus, you can get on the second one. But it also means that, you know, with that prioritization, you don't always need it, which is great. And then finally, everything around agile is heading towards having an evolving solution, which is really what I've just described with the iterative approach, in that we are trying to go as early as possible into a new way of working. We're trying to deliver value as early as possible. And we will then nudge towards the ultimate destination, because we'll do a little bit more, then a little bit more. But we've got that early value, that early sense of achievement. We've created trust because we've delivered things early, and people can see that we've made a shift to a new way of working. So they can see something concrete rather than the hypothetical plan that I put in front of you of, we're going to do this, 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 and this, and then we'll go live. You've actually got a new way of working underway. And in that evolving solution, we get a huge amount of early benefit. I have another story for this. For the evolving solution, I've been working with an organization that had wanted to change how HR functions within the organization. A real shift being a more strategic function, giving a lot more consideration to the future of work and how we bring on and develop new talent, and a lot less around the administration of how people work, a lot more pushing that back to line managers and their teams. And they decided, as with many of these things, to commission a new HR platform. And that's going to be delivered in June of this year. Actually, it's running 4 months late, so it'll probably be October before it's actually delivered. But with this evolving solution, one of the things being able to do is, instead of just sitting there twiddling our thumbs for 18 months, because it was conceived in November 2020. So the developers have been working on the new platform since then. So they've been working all the way through 2021. But we didn't just sit there and wait for this magical moment. We used the idea of an evolving solution and say, there are things that we know are coming technically, but would help us move our behaviours towards how we want things to be. One of those is we want team members and supervisors and line managers to actually work in a more autonomous and empowered way. There is an app coming that is going to help teams who perhaps they are, I can't tell you much about the company except that they work in department stores and they're all on different shifts. And what this is about is enabling people who, let's say I'm rostered for Saturday morning and I can't make Saturday morning, maybe some family problem I've got. I normally call my supervisor, my line manager, and then it becomes their problem to sort out the fact that I can't turn up for work. What we're doing is shifting that towards, hey, I've got buddies in my team and I will contact them and one of them will volunteer to take over, and we've sorted out amongst ourselves, and we're taking that off the line manager's job. We've actually put that in place before there is actually the app. We're using a WhatsApp group to do it, and we're using spreadsheets to do it. And yes, it's a little clunky, but the thing is, the shift in that empowered behavior has happened already. And in fact, we've been through a couple of iterations as well. Because when we started moving to the buddy system, we did this one-to-one. So I would have a buddy and we would buddy up. And if I couldn't do my shift, maybe they could do it. And we realized that didn't work. And actually what we've hit on now is a 1-to-3 buddy system seems to work. But we've shifted the behavior. And now line managers aren't doing a whole load of sort of on ad hoc rostering all the time. They can get on with other things. And it's that classic evolving solution. Let's not wait until we absolutely have a technical solution in front of us. Let's try and move to the new behavior and get the value of that new behavior into the business as soon as possible. So that's the evolving solution. And the business need, on-time delivery, iterative approach, and evolving solution are all backed up by another key concept, which is collaboration. Collaboration is the organized sharing of information and activities. And I think the emphasis there is on organized. You actually have to put a bit of effort in to making that collaboration happen. So those are the key concepts around agility. So it's agility, broad brushstroke agility, and how this would be the building blocks of your agile culture. And what I'm going to talk about now is the leadership behaviors that underpin these concepts. Just a quick check-in. You can use your hand signals. Am I making sense? Are you thinking that this is interesting, or would you like me to stop and go home? All right, a few thumbs up there. So that gives me, oh, a heart. I'm liking that, Anna. Thank you. Okay, so I'm seeing, okay, I'm making sense. Because honestly, I've had a really long day. And if I'm not, it's okay. I can go home and have a coffee. I've been at my desk for 12 hours. Right, okay then. So if the concepts are starting to make a bit of sense, let's look at the leadership piece. So first of all, these leadership behaviors, I'm going to take you through things like you have to, for an evolving solution, you're going to have to imagine the future state and flex that vision as well. And you're going to have to be able to live with uncertainty. I'll explain what these all are in a bit. If you're going to address business need, again, imagining the future state, but also some key decision-making skill in there. With on-time delivery, that key decision-making, but it has to be partnered with an ability to break things down to very small steps, which I'll show you. With collaboration, you're going to have to voluntarily and willingly have curiosity, because you want to seek the input of others, and you're going to have to be willing to relinquish control. This is not a hierarchical top-down model that we're looking for. We talk about autonomy, we talk about empowerment in Agile all the time, and that's core to collaboration. And then finally, we are going to be looking at the iterative approach, which certainly brings out the small steps and, again, the living with uncertainty. So let me crack on then and see if I can explain some of these things. The first is, I think the key thing is we have to imagine the future state. The destination, if we are to have flexibility, then we need an anchor point. Flexibility on top of flexibility doesn't work. It's complete chaos. So what we need is an anchor point, and I put it up here as the end goal. That's the anchor point around which we flex. And just look at this diagram for showing you how we flex. You know, we do a little bit of change, and then we flex. And maybe because the end goal has shifted a little bit. And then we do a little bit more. And again, we shift because the end goal has shifted a little bit. That willingness, I think, to actually flex, to both have that end goal and be able to identify something that is compelling, that people want to move towards. I think that is the ability to imagine the future state. Is the key thing about this is it is not a shopping list of features and functions. It absolutely is not that shopping list. It is much more about, this is how we're going to work in the future. This is our destination. This is the capabilities we have. This is how we do things around here. In fact, it can be any or one of this combination of things. You know, what we do perhaps is shifting. I'm working with an organization at the moment. It's talking about digital transformation. Who isn't? But in their case, they are they sell building supplies, and they have an awful lot of stores in their country. And what they want is a digital transformation, and really talking about what does that end goal look like. And the first thing they're saying is, we want to get a message out there that it is complementary to our stores, not closing the stores. So we want to be clear that it's an additional way of delivering service to customers. It's not in competition with them. Okay, fine. And what are you going to offer customers in this digital way? And they've actually talked about something really interesting about how we can use digital tools to enable customers to order more from us, and we can deliver straight to them. So that will be fantastic, because we've actually got more customers than we've got room in our stores to manage. A fantastic place to be. But they've really started to talk about what the business will look like. What's the shape of the business? It's not a set of requirements. So when it comes to imagining the future state, it describes what the organization can do, who it does it for, how this fits into their competitive landscape, how it fits into where they think the future of their industry is actually going to go into. And I think what's also interesting is that if you've got that imagining the future state, you've also got to be able to flex the vision. Now, I think that when it comes to leadership behaviors, maybe the underpinning behavior here is courage. Because when you say you're going to flex something, it means, and you can probably see here that I changed the end goal, you know, it changed from the original sort of shape and color to the next one, and then the next one. Because what I say digital transformation looks like today, for example, with an organization, because it is very situational, but 6 months from now in that same organization, that digital transformation will look different, because they would have added to the scope of it, and they would have dropped some things from the scope as they've learned more. I think that's what makes this so important, is that the reason that we need to be able to flex the vision is because there are so many changes around us. I work with a lot of boards who think that they are making the change, but I also put the case that whatever change you're deciding upon, whatever change you're scoping, you're also a taker of the change, because there are changes happening around you that you have no influence over, whether it's a change in regulatory conditions because you're in a regulated business like financial services or pharmaceuticals, or perhaps it's a change because your technology partners have decided to retire certain of legacy systems and you've got no choice over that. But you have to be willing to flex, because we are in a world of continuous change, and you're not always the architect of that change. So you have to bend, you have to be bendy, you have to be flexible, because there are so many things you have to flex around outside of your own control. I think one of the things that I created a paper that I think is being distributed to you if you wanted to read up on this afterwards. But I think one of the things I found to be really helpful when I talk about flexing the vision We've said that it's you being responsive to new information, flexing. You have to make it sound something good, I think. And what I found to be the most help to persuading leaders to be this vulnerable and this open about sort of saying, well, what I said 6 months ago has now shifted a bit, is call it something aspirational, like adaptive leadership. Heifetz and Laurie years ago wrote a whole paper on adaptive leadership, and I have found that some of their quotes can be very helpful and sort of challenging, always challenging what you said your vision was going to be and being willing to roll with it. I had an experience of this recently, and I watched the emotions on the faces of people as we talked about this situation, which ranged from horror to and sort of fear, what's coming next, through to nodding in agreement that yes, this was the truth. And what it was this: end of last summer into early autumn, working with a group of very clever people. So these are not stupid people who are making stupid mistakes. We were creating a 3-year strategy for an organization. And in a world of continuous change, 3 years is actually quite far out, actually, these days. After all, that was at a time when we didn't know that there was going to be a 4th wave, and we didn't have the issues in Ukraine. So we were planning in a very different environment to the ones we have now, because now we've entered a cost of living crisis. We've entered yet another supply chain crisis. And that's not what we had on the horizon in September, October last year. We were looking at a far more optimistic model post-COVID, how excited that would be. That hasn't proven to be the case. And that was what was interesting. In March, I sat down with a big cup of tea on a Saturday morning, like I usually do, and started to read the strategy paper, because it was 6 months after we'd launched it. And, you know, so that's 1/6 of the way through our party. So I thought, let's have a little look. And what was really interesting was that about 20% of what we had said we would be doing had already become obsolete. And I started to calculate in my head, well, if we're now down to 80% and we lose another 20% in 6 months' time, that'll be 64% of what we've got. And if we take another 20% off that 64% next spring, then, oh. And eventually, as I played it out in my head, I realized that we'd have about 25% of our original strategy would be true 3 years on. Now, I've used that story a few times in the last few weeks, because it really helped people go, do you know what? Flexing my vision is actually maybe a really sensible thing to be doing. It's not a dumb move. It's not an admission of defeat. It's not an admission I was wrong. It's actually the cleverest thing I can do. And I think a lot of what I end up doing is talking about how, by adopting these leadership behaviors, they are actually the leadership behaviors of, you know, part the way through the 3rd decade of the 21st century. We are where we are, and these are the kinds of leadership behaviors that we actually need. So let's have a look at the next one. The next one is identifying small steps. And what you're looking for is, yeah, ultimately, we want a new capability. We want a complete solution. We want a shift in ability. But whatever that is, we have to be willing to break it down, and then break it down possibly into even smaller steps. The reason that this breakdown is so important is we get into subcomponents and even sub-subcomponents, is that you're always asking yourself, can this be used without the other things? Does this small sub-component actually solve part of the problem? And if we put that into operational use right now, would we actually be shifting, in a positive way, shifting the capability of the organization? Does this component in its own right actually give us something that we don't have right now? Does it in fact enable the creation of another component? Does it help us get on the way? I find this to be probably one of the hardest things to teach in either training courses or in coaching sessions, that ability to break things down and imagine what the component elements are, and actually be willing to give this a bit of a go. I've I often tell lots of different stories about how, you know, I want the complete solution, but I'm going to have to live with something that in the small steps. I think the reason that it causes so much of a problem is that it means that I have to accept fairly early on that I'm going to live with less than the perfect solution. I get a little bit of the solution, but there's still a lot more to come. And the other thing that I think is really interesting about that is, therefore, there's a deep-seated realization that, oh, there's going to be more effort, because I get a little bit of it underway, and then I have to sort of circle back and repeat the effort to get the next little bit underway, and then circle back and repeat the effort to get the next little bit underway. So I think instinctively we as human beings kind of know that there is more effort involved in doing little pieces, taking little steps. But I think that it's also another threat to doing these smaller steps, and therefore this evolving solution, this iterative approach, is that you get an early opportunity to find out if you're right or not. And I think sometimes we just instinctively, I'm working on something which involves 15 solutions. We're just putting one into trial mode now. And I know that there's a number of people around the table who want us to complete all 15 of them simultaneously and then go live with the complete solution. And there's a part of me that realizes that it's because they're worried that when they see the first one, they're really not going to like it, and they think they're going to find out they're on the wrong path. And it's sort of like, again, courage. Have you started to see how courage is a core leadership capability that runs through all of these behaviors? You've got to have that courage to take those small steps. But it's also that ability to take the overall capability and break it down into small steps. I've got a silly story for you, but it was one on my mind this weekend, because it's really it's central to me having some kind of decent life. I have rescued in the last 8 months 2 dogs who've both had very big health problems, and they've now come to live with me. One of them is just over 12 stone. He's a Saint Bernard, come Mastiff kind of guy, and he can't fit in the back of my car. Well, I have tried for the last few months with a trainer to get him mobile coming into the car so I could be able to take him to the vets and things. Not happening. Mainly because he is so huge that when he gets in the car roof, even though it's a hatchback, the car roof sort of sits on his head. So we iterated and we tried something else. A friend of mine brought her van. She's got a Renault Kangoo, and she brought it up one Saturday, and me and the dog trainer, well, we didn't have to do much. We opened the door and he just got straight in, and he's got massive amount of headroom. So clearly he has indicated what is the right solution for him. So I'm thinking, right, okay, let's get a van then. And then, of course, what I start to do is, instead of just, my friend's got an old van worth a few £1,000s. And I thought, right, let's go off and get an old secondhand van. I think hers is about 17 years old. That'll be fine. That'll get this solution underway. But what did I start to do? Oh, I started to sort of fantasize about the bigger, the more complete solution. Oh, I can go to the Renault garage and get sort of like a nearly new one. It's a lot more money, but oh, it'd be really nice. And then, of course, I could get rid of my car because I don't really need 2 vehicles. And I'm thinking, get a grip, Melanie. You lecture on this for a living. Go for the small solution. Go for the cheaper, the small solution, the less risky solution. Get an old van. Try it out. He got in it once or twice, but actually he might not get in it every time. So just spend a few thousand, get that solution, keep your car so you don't have to go through all the hassle of getting rid of the car and making it a bigger project than it need be. So I'm just telling this story to illustrate that even though I talk about the importance of breaking stuff down into smaller and smaller steps so that you can just slip them in and get them underway, if I get the old van for a few thousand, £2,000 or £3,000, it might not have the longest MOT history in the world, you know, but it might just work for a few months, and we'll see if Santos is going to get in his car and regularly go out with me. If he does, then I can consider at that point iterative. Have you seen this? Iteratively, maybe I'll upgrade to a nicer van. And then maybe I'll sell the car to help pay for that nicer van. But you see my point. You've got to be quite strong with yourself. Otherwise you hold on to the perfect bit, you know, and it's just so easy to do. Yeah, to go to the nth degree, to the end complete solution. And again, so it is a leadership behavior. And I'm just, by telling this story about myself, I'm hoping I'm illustrating that you have to catch yourself sometimes in the moment and go, you're going too big. Pull it down a bit, sub component, try a little bit, get that working, and then move on, because now you've got a proof point. And the behavior of a 12-stone dog, who if he doesn't want to move, isn't going to move, is something I really need to test out. I need to get the new behavior in the dog. And that can be a 17 or 18-year-old van rather than a 3-year-old van. You know, the key thing is I've got to have that proof point and normalize getting in and out the van. And that doesn't need a perfect, you know, shiny new van that looks lovely and hasn't got any rust. Yeah. Hopefully, am I still making sense? I'm about halfway through and I just want to check in with you guys. Yes or no? Yeah? Bringing it to life a little bit? Yeah? I'm not lecturing on any agile methodologies, and I always wonder in the evening whether or not people were really looking for that. So if I'm doing what you want, I'm really pleased. Okay, let's kick on then. So we've had small steps. What comes next? Right. Well, now, living with uncertainty. Oh, this is a biggie. I think the first thing we have to say is that with uncertainty, one of the things that organizations that are really clever and leaders who are really clever have a well worked out, a regular, quite structured process for horizon scanning. They have a way of looking at, they've set their vision, and this is connected with flex the vision, isn't it? They've set their vision, but what they do is they look around them and go, right, what else is coming? Other people in our industry are changing. Some of our biggest competitors are doing new things. Government legislation is changing. Societal trends are changing. Oh, new technological solutions are becoming available. Oh, there are different economic drivers, like the cost of living crisis or the supply chain disaster that we've got, many of us. So that horizon scanning helps people come up with new alternatives, new ideas. And that has to be partnered with a portfolio management approach. If you've got lots, and we're all in a situation where we've got more ideas and more ambition than we've got resources. So being able to basically capture these, categorize them, catalog them, that's what a portfolio is, isn't it? It is effectively, it's that collection of all of your ideas, some of which then get planned, some of which then go into actually are commissioned and go into progress. But that horizon scanning means it's also that being open to new information, you know. So living with uncertainty is that willingness to be open and be curious, but it's got to be partnered with this kind of structured approach. You know, I put Moscow here, but you've got to have some kind of evaluation criteria that move you through something goes from idea to planned and from planned into progress. It sounds easy, but of course, one of the biggest issues about having this kind of structured approach, but underlying that dealing with uncertainty, is that we have to be curious, interested, and tuned in to the world around us. Where's the world around us going? And we've got to partner that then with a recognition that because there's more information coming in, there's more decisions required from us. And therefore, Moscow plays a very big part, I think, in criteria-driven decision-making, not emotional-driven decision-making. What I mean by that is emotional decisions are taken because people have powerfully argued, passionately argued for their point of view. Perhaps the emotion is also connected to the fact they're quite a charismatic person, or they have quite a lot of hierarchical authority within the organization. So what they say goes. That emotional driven decision making means that different things are flavors of the month. And on any given day, something might be, you know, in favor or out of favor. Whereas in this world of agility, if you're going to have flexibility, you have to partner it. I've said it before about there have to be certainties. We've talked about time being one of the certainties. The other certainty, I think, is the criteria upon which something gets approval or gets put on hold. My cleverest clients have a really well worked out set of criteria about how an idea, how strongly it contributes to the benefits, whether those are the sort of tangible cost reduction, revenue increase ones, whether or not they are contributing to customer satisfaction, staff engagement, whether they're contributing to the values of the organization and it being a responsible citizen. But they have a well worked out set of criteria against which they evaluate their ideas. And I think it's that willingness to apply those, identify those criteria and always apply them, that is key to being able to deal with uncertainty. Now, here's the problem. Back in the real world, portfolio management, to me, I look at this and I think, well, that's all very sensible. Why wouldn't we want to do it? But of course, the answer is that if you have this well worked out criteria driven decision making, it takes away personal power and it puts people at the mercy of a process, and that can make people very uncomfortable, particularly if you happen to be somebody who's good at arguing and advocating for your point of view and usually win arguments. Now what you're doing is you're subjugating your ability to get your idea on the table to a process where your idea is put through this sort of evaluation criteria, and sort of it might be found to not be as strong a contender as an idea from somebody else. Had you been able to argue for your idea, you would have won. But having had a criteria-based decision, you've lost. It's not been seen as valuable. Now, clearly, the criteria-driven decision-making is probably better for the organisation, but we are not an organisation. We are first and foremost human. And so that willingness to sort of sit on our hands and accept the judgment of the criteria, that's what makes this so incredibly difficult. It means you have to change your behaviour. You have to greet defeat with equanimity. And I think that can be quite hard to do at any level. Leadership, after all, is a role and it's a way of being. It is not a management grade. So everybody's subject to this. We all have it. But are you willing enough to be able to go with this criteria-driven decision making? Then we get on to, in this decision making, I thought you quite liked this slide because I drew this up for a financial services company last summer, and it really kind of helped, because I think it shows also that the poor leadership is when collectively everybody's advocating for their ideas, their decisions. And then you get a whole mix of critical and non-critical stuff all sitting in the same portfolio. And I'm not sure how much help that really is to us, because it kind of all assumes that all of these things are going to contribute to the end goal. Whereas I think what we're talking about here on criteria-driven decision-making and the prioritization mechanism is that what we're doing is we're committing only to the activities needed for the evolving solution. And I thought that a CEO last summer, for whom I drew this diagram, articulated this really well, because he said, you know, problem is, Mel, I'm doing the top half, and I kind of know I'm doing the top half, and I want you to stop me doing it, because what happens is we're all debating loads of ideas and things we could be doing in the organization. And he said, and I hear all of my great colleagues saying things, and I go, oh, that's good. Oh, that's good. Oh, yes, we should do that. And he said, the problem is in my head, one more won't hurt. And he said, that's how our portfolio is getting completely out of control. And I think with agility, yes, we're flexible, we want to be fast to market, but there is always the underlying problem of overload, too many ideas not being controlled. And he was alert to the risk, but he recognized that his own mental model, in his head, he was saying, oh, one more won't hurt, is actually, and as he and I discussed it, you know, that's probably a nice little mantra when you're greeting a box of chocolates or a bottle of wine. One more glass won't hurt, one more chocolate won't hurt. I'm sure health professionals would disagree, but we both agreed that perhaps for a multi-million-pound investment, that wasn't the best approach. But he was honest enough to share how it felt as a leader to go down this route and really talk about applying those prioritization criteria. So hopefully that's giving you a sense of, you know, I didn't want to give you these leadership behaviors and go, hey, here's the magic formula. We've got to talk about how people interpret them and how people do them and how difficult they are to do, if the truth be known. I don't have a diagram for the next one that I want to talk about because I couldn't think of any particular visual, but I want to talk about the fact that what we have to do is seek the input of others. And I think there is a leadership behavior here around building bonds with other people. You've got to stay curious, yes, but there was something about how our brains behave, which is very interesting. When we are feeling like we're all part of the same group and that we've got lots in common and we're all in the same situation, then when I listen to what you have to say, my brain is using the same part that it uses when I'm speaking. And what happens is when you're speaking, your brain is going, yeah, brilliant, well done. Your brain acts as your own sort of personal cheerleader. When we have a thought, our brain immediately gets behind it. It gets behind the concept and encourages us to act on it. When we hear the views of others who we see as different to ourselves, not one of us, we are far more skeptical and far more cautious. Agility is about collaboration. We've seen that already. So we're going to have to overcome that skepticism. And the easy way to do that is you have to form bonds with others. You have to find common areas of interest. You have to be interested enough in people to want to build a perspective with them, a relationship with them, to share their perspective. Easier said than done. You can probably think here that we're talking here about being quite empathetic, seeing the world through your eyes, not necessarily just through my eyes, for example. There was a great experiment years ago, very famous, from Harvard, which was around how the brain works and in terms of this relationship building. One group of negotiators was told, you know, you're going to have to negotiate a deal. Time is money. Get on with it. Get it done as quickly as possible. The other group were told, yes, you have to negotiate a deal with this group, but it is part of your objectives to form bonds with these people, to find common areas of interest, to build relationships with them. And you must do that to your satisfaction before you begin the negotiation. And you can probably guess, can't you, that those who were asked to build the relationships had far more negotiated settlements, and the settlements were of a much more win-win nature for both parties than the group who were told to just get on and negotiate. And I always keep that in my mind when I'm thinking about building these bonds. And we have to build trust as well. And what's interesting about trust, I did hundreds of interviews, over 400 interviews, about how do you create trust, is the question I posed. I wrote it up in my Agile Change Management Handbook, and there were 5 factors, but top above all of them for creating trust was being reliable. Do what you said you would do when you said you would do it. So I think there is something in there around empathy, but there's also something about being trusted as well. The two go together. The last leadership behavior I'm going to talk about is, again, we've talked about courage. I want to talk about relinquishing control. This one is always thought-provoking when I bring it up, because what I start by saying is, now we from an Agile perspective might want to talk about empowerment, we might want to talk about autonomy, we might want to think about autonomy as a key element of intrinsic motivation, really that inner fire that gets things done within the organization. So surely intrinsic motivation is something we really want to be going for. And I can try to sell relinquishing control on all of those good things, but I don't find it as effective as what I'm about to say. which is a very pragmatic response to the fact that the pace of change in our organizations is incredibly high. And I then talk about the fact that therefore, as leaders, I don't think we can supervise everything. I'm involved in a change for over 100,000 staff at the moment. There's no way I can supervise everything. And I think if I go in trying to take an awful lot of control, I'll be on the right hand side of this diagram, in that I will be stepping all over my teams and duplicating all of their effort. It doesn't sound like a winning thing, but the thing that I think is most important is that if I say, you know, with the pace of change being so high, I can't supervise everything, relinquishing control is actually it's a mental health support for me. It's a survival mechanism for leadership, I think, because by ceding control to people who are more than capable of taking the decisions, I've just got to trust them, I can pull back the time I need to actually do the job that I'm supposed to be doing. Micromanagement is incredibly dangerous for leaders. Micromanagement leads to burnout. Micromanagement leads to losing perspective. So I think when you're talking about relinquishing control, and that is core to Agile, that autonomy piece, think about the benefits that it gives to the person who is relinquishing the control. Stop talking in terms of benefits for the team being autonomous and being empowered. I think we've got the argument the wrong way round in an awful lot of our Agile sort of textbooks and materials. I think what instead we have to do is flip it and say, yeah, but as a leader, how are you going to benefit? You're going to benefit from the fact that actually you can get on with the bigger picture thinking that you need to be doing, and actually stop attending all the meetings. I mean, you probably know as well as I do, Microsoft put out that research last year, which said that the number of meetings we're having has gone up 40% since the pandemic. I know an awful lot of leaders who are showing up in body only to a meeting, scrabbling around in the first 10 minutes of the meeting, trying to work out what the meeting was about. They've done absolutely no prep for the meeting. They're making no substantive contribution, but they could tick off their list that they turned up. And now we're starting to see maybe more of a backlash against that and going, do you know what? I need to be controlling the things I need to control, but I'm going to have to delegate out to lots of other people. So relinquishing control, I think, personally, as a leadership benefit, it's the mental health benefit. If we're not careful, we'll have burnout. Let the people who are actually at the sharp end of doing the work and who really know all the ins and outs be the ones that take the decisions. So be on the left, not on the right of this diagram. So in terms of where we got to, I hope, I'm going to go back all the way to the this diagram now. I hope that what I've given you, there we go, is a quick run through of what's happening in terms of leadership behaviours and how connected they are to making the Agile dream a reality. I've seen lots of things going in the chat, but I can't possibly read them and talk to you at the same time. So I'm now going to hand over to my colleagues at BCS, who perhaps are going to use some of the content there to pose some questions to me, or let you unmute yourselves so that you can pose questions directly to me.
Yes, there are lots of questions for you, Melanie. Let's start from the beginning. So many, 6:47 it started. Yes. How do we get the senior management to accept the change of the application support architecture processes before we actually start on the Agile Agile approach? Is this would be necessary for the cadence of releases?
Okay, I think that's quite a technical question. Do you want to read it out again so I can try?
Yes. Yes. How do we get the senior management to accept the changing of the application support oblique architecture processes before we actually start on the Agile approach? Is this ooh, I lost it now.
Okay, I think I get the gist. I think what you're saying is, how do we get senior managers to agree to a shift in maybe how we do something?
Yeah, before we agree to on the agile approach, as this would be necessary for cadence of releases. Yeah, so yeah, you're right. It's how do we get the senior management to agree to this for the releases?
I think the thing is getting senior management to agree to anything, and this might cut across a few questions here, is, and you know, some of you know that I'm a former CEO, and now I do a lot of board advisory work. And at the end of the day, it comes down to the fact that talk their language. If you want an enabler, like changing your support or changing your architecture processes or whatever, what you're describing there is you want some enablers to happen. So you want to make some changes before you make other changes. You want to get senior management on board with any decision, talk their language, and their language are basically at a very strategic level. You have to put it into the context of how will this help us get to where we want to go. So you have to be able to articulate at a, not at a technical level, but at a higher level, what will this do for us? And basically, that's why I've immediately hit on the word enabler from what you've described, because what you're saying is if we make these changes, it will enable other changes later on. So basically, you're talking about taking the cork out of the bottle, aren't you? You're removing a blockage, you know, by getting this enabler underway. So I think you have to talk in a more strategic language, absolutely. An alternative is that you talk about the other thing that they are obsessed with, delivering against strategic objectives, and the other thing is risk. And so you point out how what you're trying to get done mitigates a risk, whether it mitigates a financial risk, an operational risk, a reputational risk, that can be really quite powerful. Then that is a way I think you get people on board. Okay, what else? What other questions you got for me?
Glenn Seeger, are you happy with the answer? Oh, it's not replied. Yes, he says yes.
Oh,
okay. Yes, he's happy with it. There's another question, Paramita. How do we use this iterative approach where organization needs view of cost and timelines before the delivery starts? And must admit, somebody has suggested, is there a vision provided?
Yeah, I think let's go back to the first principles on Agile. From a traditional approach, what we are doing is we gather all the requirements up front, and then what happens, put it all into a lovely Gantt chart, and what you're able to tell me then, let's assume you're playing the role of project manager for a moment. What you are telling me then, because you've knitted together all of the requirements, is this is how long it will take, this is how much it will cost. And of course, you can create a business case around that, and that fits very nicely into the budgetary cycle of your organization, because you can claim a certain amount of budget, and if it gets approved, that's your bit, and that works really well. Agile turns things on its head. And I think if you want to fit within a budgetary cycle for any organization, timelines and money, what you have to do is you have to say, right, okay, this is the problem we want to solve. I'm not going to go through all the requirements that might solve it, because we're flexible, we're agile. But we know this is the problem we want to solve. The question I have for senior management is, how much of the budget and how much of the time do you want to allocate to this? Because it's absolutely turns things on its head, because what you're doing is you are posing a question as opposed to giving the answer that you would normally have given in a more traditional approach. So you can still get your budgetary sign-off, you can still fit within the timelines of an organization, but what you do is you ask, how much time do you want to allocate to this and how much money you want to spend? I remember an example of this with a supermarket chain who wanted to basically put in not just automated tills that we have now, but they wanted to put in scanning capacity so that I could go into the supermarket at lunchtime and I could scan on my phone the drink, the sandwich and the bar of chocolate I bought and walk straight out, because it had taken the money out of my account, whether that was Apple Pay or whatever. And they, are very excited about this initiative. And so I turned around to them and said, okay, you want we're going to go with a pilot of this in a central London store. Okay, how quickly do you want to see the results of this, and how much money are you prepared to spend, because you know how much value it will generate? How much budget are you going to give me? Now that caught them on the hop, because they were expecting me to tell them, and I said, no, I will craft the answer, the way we do this. I will craft the way we do this around what money you have available, what time you have available for making it happen. And I think that is the true agile approach. And so, thought-provoking, huh? Much more difficult, but it works.
Yeah. Paramita, are you happy with the response Melanie has given you? Hello, Paramita? Are you there?
Good grief, this is like
No
a seance.
response. Ah, well, she's probably, I don't know. Are there, okay, we'll go to the next question, Michelle. Are there any sorts of project you think can't or shouldn't be delivered iteratively?
Iteratively, I think that iterative projects, we are nudging towards the solution, and we're adding on a little bit and a little bit and a little bit more. And I think that I'm certainly not going to stand here and say agile good, traditional bad, because I think that's far too simplistic. I do think that the projects where you actually don't need an agile approach, you don't need to evolve the solution, because there are costs to evolving the solution. Because when I put a little bit of something in place, I have to, as I've already said, I have to circle back and do the effort all over again for the next win, and circle back and do it all over again for the next win. And there are often diseconomies of scale in doing that, because sometimes I have to unpick part of the early solution to be able to scale up the next bit of the solution. So agile doesn't come, it's not a free offer here. There are definitely pains to an agile approach. And if you've got a project where you're absolutely clear on exactly what is required, how it has to be done, there's absolutely no reason why you can't go straight through to, let's do a more traditional approach. We know all the requirements because we've done it so many times before. In other words, where you have absolute certainty, go for the more traditional approach, because that's like a hot knife through butter. Where you've got uncertainty and you have to nudge your way through things, that's when you want a more agile approach. And I think that's my absolute dividing line between the two.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Michelle, are you happy? Yes, great, thanks, she says. Next question is Glenn Sager. What advice would you give to leaders regarding budgeting? Traditionally, there is a budget, but the flexing may cause the budget to increase. This could be scary and will test the trust.
Yeah, I fundamentally disagree that we're going to flex the budget. I think what I've said already is that you start with, this is how much we're prepared to spend on achieving this solution. And what we do is we flex the features, the functionality that we deliver within that budget. We don't change the budget. We don't change the timeline. We flex the features and functionality that we deliver. And we deprioritize things. If we've spent too much on some of the early stuff, then we haven't got the money to spend on the later stuff. And we have to live with that. So I fundamentally disagree. I don't think we are flexing budget, and I don't think we're flexing timeline either.
Yeah, he says, so a don't exceed budget concept. This approach is, yeah, he's happy with that. Next one is Michael W. When you have both clicks and brick as a channel, I would suggest any returns from clicks. Oh, I don't think it's a question. It's just telling somebody comment. What can be done if an earlier dependency has not been completed due to issues beyond the team control, and how can the project move forward?
Well, I think that's when something has failed earlier on in the process, you've always got the decision. You either have to put everything else on hold and get it fixed, and therefore later on things will drop off the end because you haven't got the time or the money for them. Or you put a halt to the project and go, this bit has failed, and actually it's so fundamental to what we're trying to do, we think that we ought to stop and we ought to reconsider whether or not we're on the right path at all. So you should use that failure as a wake-up call to really stay curious and question, are we on the right path? And let's hear some views and take some time out to have a bit of a think.
Yes, I'm happy for that answer. Yes. Michelle W. You're missing the North Star. Okay, let's see. Melanie, can you please? Dorit. Melanie, can you please elaborate on the idea of MVP and leading the stakeholders to the idea of MVP 1, 2 to the N? Example, continuous improvement. MVP, mother.
So minimum. So you mean delivering on the minimum viable product, minimum shippable product, minimum usable subset. They all start with the word minimum, don't they? So I'm not sure I understand the question, but you know, yes, we should always, the minimum is something we can put in place, but we're always trying to build up from that point.
Yeah. Michelle? Yeah, let's see. Galaxy tab. Keeping technical debt to a minimum is a challenge when developing incrementally. Oh, somebody's just commenting. How can organization embrace agility whilst working with an annual investment planning process?
I think I will refer you to my previous answer, which is that if you have an annual process, there is no reason why you cannot still allocate a certain amount of time and money, or resources and money, to initiatives. Go back always to the end goal. What is the capability we are looking to build here? How do we value that? You've got to start at the very beginning by saying, what is the value of what it is we're trying to create here? Is it worth paying for? Do we really want to pay for it? If so, can we have a chunk of the budget for that, please? So I think, you know, it's just being sensible up front about being able to value what it is you're creating and how much you're willing to spend on it.
Yeah, she said you covered it. Yes. She's happy. There's another question. Actually, it's a comment from Jane. Loving the storytelling which brings it all to life.
Well, that's good, because I do think that emotionally we have to. If you take anything away from this, I think that one of the things that in an agile world we are asking people to behave differently, and I've said numerous times today we have to flip something on its head, like relinquish control. I'm saying flip the argument, stop arguing for the importance of empowering the team and start talking to leaders about how this is going to lighten the load for them. You know, I'm constantly saying to you how you can flip things, and I hope I'm illustrating that a move to agile is quite a toughie. I'll use this. I know that you've all been online for over an hour now and probably got homes to go to, so I'll just come towards the end of my speech now by saying that I think that agile means you have to be prepared to get in there and persuade and encourage and help people find their way through adopting agile behaviors. I hope tonight, in looking at these 7 agile behaviors, and particularly if you then read the paper that I wrote for you, that you can maybe benchmark yourself against some of these behaviors. You can put some color around it in terms of what you might need to change yourselves to be more agile, and think about the relationships you have with other team members and your sponsors about whether or not you could help them adopt some of these behaviors. But one of the key ways to get people to adopt a new way of working is to connect it emotionally, and telling stories and examples, giving all of these examples were from things that we're all involved in. I'm no different to you. We're all in the sharp end of trying to make change happen in our organizations. So I know that you've got lots of stories. Just think about crafting them out and thinking, yeah, I want to tell that story to illustrate this point. Things don't come accidentally. I did think about the examples and stories I wanted to tell you to illustrate different points. And I'm just advocating that maybe that's something that you do as well. It might be worth having a go at.
Yeah, we still got lots of questions now. There's another one. When using criteria to prioritize projects, do you find those same charismatic leaders just game the system?
I think charismatic leaders always try to game the system, and I think you have to be alert to that. And a lot of my very successful colleagues would say that they've been through numerous iterations numerous iterations in terms of coming up with those criteria. And I will tell you one little story, which is that I recognize humanity in this situation. And I have done, in order to get people to adopt a more portfolio management approach, I have over the years said, sometimes I've given out little gold stars. And I've said, hey, you can hold, sometimes if your idea is not winning according to the criteria, but you know deep in your heart, you passionately believe it is the right thing that the organization is doing, then you get a free vote. And you only get one of these every, it might be every quarter, every year, or whatever the group decide on. But I say you have that free vote, and you are able to say, you know, hey, I'm trumping everything else, I'm going for this one. And so giving out that can sometimes help them apply the criteria to a huge proportion of the initiatives, knowing that there is always a little get out clause, which makes them feel psychologically very safe, and therefore encourages the adoption of portfolio management.
Yeah.
Last couple of questions then, because I'm not going to stay forever. I'm exhausted.
Is it possible to answer afterwards? I can send you the questions later. Would you be able to answer them?
I'll try. If anybody wants me to answer further questions, just poke me in LinkedIn. And if I get a chance over the weekend, I'll give it my best shot, guys.
I think that sounds good. I think somebody asked if waterfall and agile can coexist.
Oh, yes, I passionately believe they can. So let me go back to the story of the HR system. And November 2020, a classic waterfall approach to the solution of the systems and functionality that we're going to give this new strategic HR function. Was conceived in November 2020, and a contract based on a waterfall approach, time and materials, over 18 months. So they were due to deliver at the end of June. As I said, it's going to be October now, but so traditional things. So we don't get the solution at all until at least June. So what did I do in January of last year? Well, I started working with the HR teams, but also the line managers and team members, as we shifted a lot of sort of people administration out into the line and into individual responsibility. So we started lots of behavioural change, wave after wave of behavioural change, wave after wave of new capability going online, even though the actual system wasn't there. That's how I ended up with the app still isn't available, but we decided to do this buddy system and this taking more personal responsibility for finding somebody to cover your shift via spreadsheets and a WhatsApp group for each team. It's working. It's clunky and it's not streamlined, but the app will make it so much better. But that's fine, because the behaviors and the habits and the routines about team members sorting out their own rosters has now become the norm. I didn't have to wait for that traditional approach, but when the traditional approach does deliver, then we will shift ourselves onto that platform, definitely. So I passionately believe that is the right answer.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Let's see what I can.
Does that help everybody? Are we getting a general? I'm going to just do a quick vote. Have I done a good job? Did you get useful information from it? If you want to pursue this conversation with me, because we could stay here for hours and do this, then get hold of me via LinkedIn. And I also publish a lot on my insights page on my website, and every month I do commit to adding new materials. Tomorrow night I'm going to be doing another webinar on neuroscience and neuro hacks and how we become even more persuasive. So hopefully I'm showing I am definitely committed to keeping the conversation going. But I've been at my desk now for 15 hours. So it's been quite a day.
Oh, wow. Yes, long time, 15 hours. Oh, there have been now a lot of people are going and saying how useful this be. A lot of takeaways from this session. Yes, there's been a lot of comments here. I don't know if it's superb, really informative. Definitely time to let you go, Melanie. Really informative and great. Everything. I love the way you turn things on your head to think about traditional challenges. Great thought-provoking presentation. People have actually commented and have really good discussion on this chat. It's been really lively event. Thank you so much, Melanie. Everybody, please say thank you to Melanie. Join me to say thank you, but I think a lot of people have commented already. I don't really have to say that.
Excellent. Right. Well, I'm going to.
I know how busy you are, and
I think I've earned a gin and tonic. That's what I've concluded from all the thanks in the chat. So thank you so much, guys, and keep in touch.
If it were face to face, you would have got a glass of wine there. Yes, it's a shame it's not face to face.
I miss those days. Was it Southampton Row or Southampton Street?
Yeah, it used to be Southampton Row. Yes, and now we are in Moorgate.
Much easier for my office. Anyway, you take care, guys. Have a lovely evening. Keep in touch, and if you want me back again to do something else in the autumn, let me know, and I'll see if I can make sense again. All right.
That sounds
take care,
good.
guys.
Yes, we will. Yeah, thank you very much, Melanie.